Hello, I'm Maria Lemieux, and welcome to Lights Cable Action. It's been a while since we've been in the studio. I hope you all enjoyed the Farmers Market episode. Today, our topic is the rising costs of cable. I'm honored to have with me, co-hosting today, the chair of the SELCO Commission, Bob Holland. Welcome, Bob.
Well, thank you, Maria. Appreciate it. I'm here to represent not only you as one of the five commissioners, but also Mike Ruffolo, Tony Trippi, and Kelly Marshall. I think it's one of the things this show is going to present is what the real challenges we have going forward on cable rates.
That's right. Our general manager, Mike Hale, had the opportunity to interview the president of the American Cable Association, Matt Polka. Let's hear what they have to say.
I'm Michael Hale, general manager of Shrewsbury's municipal cable, broadband, and telephone provider for the community here in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. Today, we are lucky to have with us the president and CEO of the American Cable Association, whose offices are in both Pittsburgh and Washington, D.C., and who are the voice of the town of Shrewsbury's interests on the cable side of the operation in Washington. And so I'd like to welcome Matt Polka, and I thank him for flying up here this afternoon on a busy holiday, a travel day, 2 days before Thanksgiving. So welcome to Shrewsbury, Matt. We're grateful that you took the opportunity to come up here and talk to both our members and anyone else interested in hearing your message as to what's going on in Washington. Before we get into some issues, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what is the American Cable ACA, American Cable Association, and what do they do?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. I love visiting with our members and spending time and learning about your issues, as well as telling everybody about what we do in Washington, D.C., and that's essentially where the American Cable Association is based. We are a group of about 780 smaller businesses that include cable companies, that include telephone providers, that include municipal providers, providers like yourselves as well throughout the country, primarily in smaller markets, smaller towns, rural areas, competitive areas, providing cable, phone, and broadband service. And what we do is unique to our communities. Our members live and work in the communities that they serve. What is different about us at ACA is that we are the unique voice of these members. And basically it's something we had to learn the hard way back in 1992 when I was with a small cable operator at the time, and we realized that Congress re-regulated our industry without taking into account the specific needs of independent companies, smaller companies, who have a different market condition than the largest providers. And we realized that one-size-fits-all regulation or legislation just doesn't work, and that we needed to create a voice for ourselves. So the American Cable Association, on behalf of Shrewsbury, as well as all of our members, works in Washington, D.C., primarily before Congress, the Federal Communications Commission, and any other agency or commission that deals with the communications issues to make sure that your concerns, your unique concerns, are heard in Washington, D.C.
And so you mentioned you had 850 members?
About 750,
750
yes.
members. So what is the size from the smallest to the largest that you represent, just to give a frame of reference?
Our largest member has about 1 million customers.
Okay.
Our smallest members, and we have quite a few of those, have way less than 100.
Wow.
I mean, we're talking very, very small systems that might serve 10 or 15 customers per system. So it is a very, very difficult proposition to begin with. But our members have been doing this for decades. That's one of the things that distinguishes us because of the unique locations of our towns and markets where it's not easy to serve. So the members that have committed to those communities are the ones that are actually delivering video, phone, and broadband service to those communities.
Another national organization that Shrewsbury and other cable operators deal with on a daily basis is called the National Cable Television Cooperative,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
based out of Kansas. How do what you do differ from what they do? I know you have some alliances.
Sure.
Maybe you just talk on the relationship and how one organization differs from the other.
Yes, the American Cable Association and the National Cable Television Cooperative are actually partners. We are the two organizations that are representing your interests and all of our members' interests. ACA does it on a political and regulatory and Washington, D.C. perspective, while the National Cable Television Cooperative, NCTC, does a lot of your business negotiations. They're negotiating programming agreements. They're negotiating, in some cases, agreements with carriage of local broadcast channels, which we'll talk about. They will do other hardware purchasing, volume purchasing, where the idea behind NCTC as a cooperative is to take the benefit of all of our member companies, combine all of their customers, and to try to provide better pricing for you when it comes to buying either programming, hardware, or other services. So we're very connected, though. In fact, NCTC and ACA work hand in hand in the issues that face our members, because as I say to NCTC all the time, any political issue has a business component and vice versa. So when we're talking about what's most important to our members from a business perspective, we know that there's going to be a policy perspective, an element of that as well, where together we can work to make sure we're taking care of the interests of our members.
Thank you. I think it'd be great if we could just jump right into the issues, because
Sure.
we only have you here for a short amount of time.
My pleasure.
And having someone with your knowledge in the industry, I think it's very valuable for our consumers to hear
Sure.
what you have to say on their behalf. And so I think one of the big issues facing small operators or middle to small operators is something known as retransmission consent. And I will ask you, rather than explain or talk about the definition, to give us what is it all about and how does it impact the customer?
Well, retransmission consent is probably the biggest issue I've ever faced in my career.
What is it?
We still haven't won it, but I can tell you one of these days on my gravestone it will say, "We solved retransmission consent." Retransmission consent is the consent that a local television station must give to you, to Shrewsbury, or to any of our members before we have the legal right to carry their local television signal on our cable systems.
And when you say local,
Yes.
what are these? These would be network they might not necessarily be owned directly by the
Correct.
network, but they have network rights.
Yes.
So it would be the big four networks.
It is. And to back up, this law, retransmission consent, was passed in 1992, was created by Congress, and it was coupled with something else called must carry. So back in 1992, Congress gave local television stations the right every 3 years to elect to be carried either by retransmission consent or by must carry. Must carry means mandatory carriage. If a station says, I choose must carry, you have to carry them, period. There's no negotiation, there's no money transaction, there's nothing like that. You have to carry them. Retransmission consent, on the other hand, another way of saying it is negotiated terms for carriage. The station has to give you their consent before you have a legal right to carry it. And so what typically happens, at least since 1993 when this was first instituted, is that cable operators and local broadcasters will come together to negotiate terms of carriage. In the old days, that was pretty simple, where local stations and local cable operators worked together to help benefit the community through fundraising efforts, through local advertising, bill inserts, promotions, etc. Now we're talking real money, where the stations and really the station owners that oftentimes are based in New York and Los Angeles are asking you and all of our other members for significant payment for the right to receive what they call free over-the-air television.
Right, so these, the channels that we're talking about, just to be clear, are the channels that people viewed before the creation of cable television platform.
Yes.
This would be ABC, NBC,
Yes.
CBS, and Fox wasn't around prior to the implementation of cable, but has since been branded as a broadcast channel.
Correct.
And so these channels, before cable existed, you would watch with an antenna in your house, and you wouldn't pay anything. And so what you're saying is, just to rehash, so I understand, is that they can say you have to carry us and not charge anything, or they can reserve the right to negotiate a fee
Correct.
to allow you to carry their channels in your cable lineup that has all the other channels that are conventional cable channels like CNN and Home and Garden Channel and ESPN and those types of channels.
Yep.
So it's a means of getting revenue to them to be part of your cable lineup.
Correct.
And when I got into this business, I'm thinking they should be paying us.
No question.
Because we are improving the signal of
Sure.
their broadcast.
Sure.
But in reality, we pay them to carry the channel that's otherwise free.
Yep.
If they elect this process.
Mm-hmm.
And so why do you think the framework, when was it established? I think you
Yep.
said 1992. But why was it established in the first place?
It's a really good question historically that we need to come back to, particularly when we look at the problems that exist in retransmission consent today. And you're right, cable created a way to distribute broadcast signals farther beyond their reach over the air. And I think we as a cable industry should be praised for that rather than have to be punished by it every 3 years in negotiating retransmission consent with broadcasters. But retransmission consent was created in 1992 when, if you look back literally 25 years ago, and this year was the 25th anniversary of the imposition of the retransmission consent law, what happened was Congress was re-regulating the cable industry. The cable industry was growing. There had been enormous customer service problems committed primarily by the larger providers, not smaller providers, and Congress said, we are going to re-regulate the cable industry. We're going to impose rate regulation once again. We're going to impose other customer service standards and things of that nature. While that process to re-regulate the cable industry was ongoing, the broadcast industry got together and said, hey, here's an opportunity for us. Now at that time, 25 years ago, the broadcast industry wasn't what it is today. It's not CBS Corp. It's not Comcast, NBC Universal. It's not Disney, ABC, ESPN. It's not Fox News Corp. It was very, very small groups of local broadcasters primarily who wanted to continue to be carried on cable. And they were able to take advantage legislatively of the effort in Congress to re-regulate cable, and basically Congress listened to the broadcasters to say, give us a right on how to choose to be carried, whether by must carry or retransmission consent. And at the time, arguably, you could say for smaller broadcasters, this made sense because even as we've talked, and I've talked with many of our members, our customers want to receive those signals. So it made sense. 25 years later, as we'll start talking about the problems that exist now, to me, the reason for retransmission consent doesn't exist because essentially you have the same rules that now are governed and negotiated by multimedia conglomerates, nationwide global conglomerates
That own many, many stations.
That own many channels and who leverage you and our other members to pay enormous amounts for what they call free TV.
And I think what is behind, is it as simple as because they can, but what is behind the dramatic or drastic draconian increases that customers are seeing, that cable operators like Shrewsbury, municipally run cable, we're not in it for a profit.
Sure.
We have no other choice but to pass these.
Absolutely.
So what's behind these steep increases? Is it just because, or what else is driving?
It is part of just because, and let me be clear. The prices that our customers are paying for the right to receive these broadcasters are not as a result of the actions of Shrewsbury or any one of our members. These are the actions of local broadcasters and major networks that are forcing our members to pay these rates for what is still free over the air. You can put up an antenna today and you can still receive, in many cases, those same signals without paying a dime. The only reason that you at Shrewsbury and all of our members are paying this is because of laws and regulations that still give broadcasters not only the right to choose retransmission consent, but other regulations, particularly one called network non-duplication, essentially imposes a monopoly market over your local market, where the only stations you can carry by law, for the most part, with a few exceptions, are stations that are local. You cannot carry a station that may be cheaper outside of your local designated market area. So that's what gives the broadcasters the ability to basically hold you hostage when it says, when they say to you, this is my station, this is my price, take it or leave it because you can't get it elsewhere. So it's certainly the outdated laws and regulations that give broadcasters the ability to do this, but also the fact that they're growing, that they have looked for many years to maximize the bundle of services to extract even more revenue, and at the end of the day, they can.
And does sports?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Sports programming play a role in these costs?
Absolutely. When you look at what the networks have paid, ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, what they have paid for the rights to carry NFL programming, Major League Baseball, NHL, NBA, exactly. When you look at what they have paid, enormous sums. I think the last go around for NFL among the networks, the rights fees paid was close to $41 billion. That has to get paid. The leagues want that money. The players want that money. That gets paid by your customers who have to pay higher and higher retransmission consent rates for the right to receive those local television stations just so that you can pay those sports rights.
I think to put it in perspective, I'll give an example of what the scenario was like here in Shrewsbury. When I started in 2011, the aggregate retransmission costs were $1.91 per subscriber per month for the big four networks. At that time, we had 11,700 plus or minus subscribers here in Shrewsbury. And so fast forward 7 years, we're now heavily engaged in negotiations for the years 2018, 2019, and 2020. And those prices that we have on offers to us, and we can't tell anyone what each individual channel for confidentiality reasons.
Well, the broadcasters don't want you to publicize that because they know your customers would be very upset.
The aggregate's gone from $1.91 per month per subscriber to what we have on the table now for only these four channels totals $11.72 per month per subscriber, with 2,000 less subscribers. So we have lost 2,000 subscribers for a variety of reasons, but I think mostly driven by price increases.
Absolutely.
And so in 2001, this cost SELCO, or Shrewsbury Cable, about, 2011. I misspoke, not 2001, but 6 years ago, it cost Shrewsbury residents about $270,000, $290,000 per year. Projected to cost, with 2,000 less subscribers per month, $1.3 million.
Yep.
So that is just blasphemy in terms, and there's no way we can't pass these costs on.
Absolutely.
So we have to, no way we can absorb them, we have to pass them on.
Absolutely.
So I think that kind of puts the situation in perspective as to magnitude. And it's not just here.
Sure.
It's all of your operators that are going to be experiencing these. At some point, the system is going to break. So my question is, I don't know what ACA can do about it, but what have you been trying to do about it in Washington?
Sure. Well, first off, as you said, you are not alone. You are in the same situation that every one of our members are in across the country, where they're negotiating for these fees. They're seeing the same types of increases. We track this very closely. There are industry analysts that follow retransmission consent pricing. Broadcasters today are extracting about $7 billion a year from consumers in retransmission consent fees. Over the next 4 or 5 years, that's expected to double, and even a few years after that to double again. And that's, again, because of these outdated rules that allow the broadcasters to demand it. But it's also because it's the only source of revenue that they really have to help fund their ongoing activities. Because when you look at the availability of cable programming, which has gotten so much better, availability of online programming, et cetera, broadcast ratings overall are declining. And consequently, when broadcast ratings decline, so does their advertising revenue, which means less advertising revenue, which is how broadcasters funded themselves before retransmission consent. Now, the only thing they have going for them from a revenue perspective is to demand payments from your customers to help make up the revenue that they're losing because of lost advertising. So what we're doing in Washington is this. We're continuing to demonstrate. Every time our members end up in a dispute where there's a blackout, we are bringing that to the attention of Washington, to the FCC, to lawmakers on the Commerce Committees, which has jurisdiction over these issues, to basically anybody that will listen in Washington to say these laws and regulations are broken and need to be updated. We have worked very hard in related matters that have focused on retransmission consent, whether it's media ownership, renewal of rights that the direct broadcast satellite dish and DirecTV, renewal of their rights to carry broadcast signals every few years. There are opportunities to look in and to try to modify these rules, to seek to change what's called the good faith negotiations rules at the FCC, to strengthen them, to protect consumers and not give broadcasters the unfettered right to basically demand any kind of payment that they want from you and your customers with no options at all. The problem is, from a perspective of Washington and how it views retransmission consent, Washington has forgotten that retransmission consent was something that they actually created. Washington likes to step back and say, we prefer not to get involved in what is an arm's length negotiations between parties at the business table. Well, it's not an arm's length negotiation. It's not a real negotiation because you, Washington, have given the broadcasters not only the right to choose, but then given them a monopoly marketplace, and you haven't changed the rules in more than 25 years. How is that fair to consumers? So we are trying to show basically by the broadcasters' own egregious behavior how broken this marketplace is and needs to be reformed at the FCC and in Washington. We're not there yet, but I can assure you we're not giving up, ever.
The rules state that both parties, the cable operators and the broadcaster or the station owners, shall negotiate in good faith. But the policing of that effort is somewhat lax, in my opinion. And you know, we're in these negotiations right now. I won't say with which provider, but one of the providers sent us their demands for pricing and other terms and conditions and said that they wouldn't allow us to even share their price requests with our own attorney. And to me, that's just outrageous. That how can you? So the negotiate in good faith, who polices that? The FCC seems to turn an eye when it comes to policing these negotiations. And I guess what happens when the two can't agree on a contract? What then happens?
Yes, the FCC is basically the initial arbiter here under the good faith rules that exist at the FCC. The FCC has set forth a number of rules that essentially constitute the rules of the road when it comes to negotiations. Broadcasters and cable operators can't provide what's called a take it or leave it offer, for instance. You can't say this is the price, take it or leave it, without any negotiations. The FCC, on the other hand, has determined that good faith over time means, well, if the broadcaster says, I want you to buy it for $5, but I'll actually give it to you for $4.99, the FCC has deemed that to be a negotiation that's in good faith. So some of the standards that they're applying, I think, are not really appropriate for what's taking place in the market. But you're right that the FCC in general and Congress has not wanted to get in the middle of these disputes. So when disputes have occurred, when a good faith complaint has been filed, typically what the FCC will try to do is encourage the parties to come together to reach a deal rather than address the problem. There were some attempts last year at the FCC to strengthen the good faith negotiation rules. The American Cable Association was very, very much a part of that. We placed on the record very sensible ideas on how to preserve stations, not disconnect consumers, not result in blackouts. For instance, one of the things that we said was parties should have the right to demand arbitration, to let an arbitrator determine what's fair here in the marketplace. That was rejected by the FCC at the time. We also said, and this is true this weekend, we're taping this right before Thanksgiving where there are a lot of important football games coming up that people want to watch. Well, there are blackouts that are occurring right now because that's leverage for the broadcaster to get a retransmission consent deal. One of the things we said was a broadcaster should not be allowed to black out a cable operator right before a marquee sporting event or some other event. very sensible solutions that we're continuing to push, but we have to find an FCC and a Congress that's willing to listen.
And so if they don't come to an agreement, blackout is the
Yes.
And some of these blackouts can last a day, but others historically have lasted months.
There are some that are still going on. We see this often where the parties do end up in a blackout situation, and let me be clear here too. The broadcast industry, when there is a blackout, will try to blame you and all of our members for the blackout. But the law says no consent, no carriage. That means if the broadcaster does not give its consent to allow our members to continue to carry their signals, our members have no legal right to carry it. So the broadcaster chooses. If there's a dispute, the broadcaster has the right to allow continued carriage while negotiation continues. They use blackouts as a means to extract more money from our customers for the right to receive what they could receive over the air for free.
And so I guess we talked a little bit about what we can do. I think you have a campaign now that you call TV Ransom.
TV Ransom, that's exactly right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, you know, we looked at what our members were going to be facing this year in their retransmission consent negotiations. And as you correctly pointed out, the numbers are staggering. What broadcasters are demanding are outrageous. We have never seen demands like this at such a level. So we knew it was not going to be a very fun experience for members at all in negotiating retransmission consent. So we said, here's what we're going to do. We may not be able to change the rules this year, but by gosh, we're going to show who's responsible for it. And the idea behind our social media campaign of TV Ransom is basically to hold the broadcasters fully accountable for their behavior, which is driving up the cost of basic cable service, basically for reception of the broadcast signals. That affects all of our customers, particularly senior citizens who really do rely on receiving these local channels. We are putting the burden and the onus and the accountability on the broadcasters for the rates that are increasing. And we're showing how broadcasters will use retransmission consent, and they will engage in activities such as, believe it or not, right before the hurricane was hitting Puerto Rico, a broadcaster blacked out providers down in Puerto Rico for retransmission consent. How they use retransmission consent in the threat of weather events, marquee events, sporting events, to simply extract more money from consumers. So we're calling it out, and we're not letting them get away with this behavior any longer.
You know, again, we're a nonprofit provider, and our interest is to protect our consumers. And I think the consumer who's in their home, getting home from work and watching TV, they don't really care whether this is a cable operator's problem or a broadcast channel's ransom. They just don't want to pay more money. So I guess, you know, you were articulated what we can do, but what can consumers do? Is there anything they can do to help this problem, or are they just stuck with paying more money?
Well, one of the things they can do is they can receive signals in their area, which many of our members and their customers can do, is put up an antenna. You can receive these signals over the air, so on other televisions you have in your house.
For free.
For free without paying a fee. There are other ways that networks are now making their programming available direct to consumers, and it's what we call over the top, or consuming video over the internet.
Right.
CBS Corporation has started something they call CBS All Access, where frankly they have one of these new Star Trek shows that you can only see on CBS All Access. Consumers can choose that directly without having to get broadcast channels through cable or satellite. So there are many more ways.
But they don't get the football in that.
They don't now. No, but if you have an antenna, you could pick it up over the air for free.
So the answer is an antenna, which you can get it for free, which goes back to the pre-cable days. It's almost like a full circle.
It's almost full circle.
Yeah.
And many of our members are actively considering installing those kinds of what we used to call AB switches that allowed you to go back between broadcast over the air and cable carriage to certainly give consumers more choices. Our member companies are also looking how over time, as their subscriber base from a video business shrinks, they're looking at providing more broadband service to their customers and to be concerned less on video, because video is very costly, and it's really something that consumers complain about all of the time because there's no choice on video. Our broadband plan gives our consumers more of the opportunity to consume the video that they want via the internet, as opposed to having to get it directly through cable.
Yeah, and in addition to providers like Amazon and Netflix, there
Absolutely.
are other over-the-top providers that also carry conventional ESPN, CNN type programming
Absolutely.
that you could stream into your home and not necessarily
Correct.
buy from your cable
That's
operator.
correct.
So,
Absolutely.
what other factors behind the rising rates would you say or what other factors are attributing to rising rates beyond retransmission consent? Clearly, it's a big driver
Sure.
of cost increases, but what other trends do you see in the cost of cable rates on the video side?
On the video
rising?
side, for sure. Well, when you look at we're still talking about retransmission consent, it's not just, part of the rate that you're charged is determined by what the networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, ask their affiliates to pay. Basically, this is a term, it's a term that we call reverse compensation. So what the networks do is, before the local stations here in your market collects anything from Shrewsbury, the networks say to the local affiliates for ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, you will pay us a certain amount in reverse compensation in order for you to keep your affiliation with us before you go out and charge and collect any fees from a local cable operator. So the networks are already imposing a cost on the stations, who then in turn have to come to you to collect not only what they just paid the networks, but what they need to continue to operate. And as you said, video subscribership is decreasing in general because of cord cutting, cord shaving. So these stations have to charge more to fewer customers to get the same amount. So that is part of the cost of retransmission consent and why it's determined. But when you look at the broader bundle, we've already talked about sports. It's true whether you're talking about ESPN, Fox Sports, NBC Sports, they all go out and they pay enormous sums to carry sports programming
And regional sports
and
network.
regional sports, and think they can come back to you to get your subscribers to pay for it. But what we're seeing now is that business is really imploding because of cord cutting and cord shaving, where cable subscribers are declining. So all of that revenue that these sports programmers were expecting to pay the rights fees up to the leagues, to the players across all sports, that's going away. And now they're frantic over what's happening because they can't pay. So that's a problem, because you see consumers saying, I don't want to pay for all of this sports programming that I never watch. And the same is true on cable programming. There are 4 or 5 major companies that own most of the programming that we see, whether it is Comcast, NBC Universal, whether it is Viacom, whether it's Discovery, Scripps Networks, and all of these companies have more than one network. And what they do is they say, in order for you to receive our most popular programming, we want you to carry all of our other channels, frankly, whether your subscribers want them or not, or want to pay for them or not. So they've guaranteed themselves this revenue. But what's happening is our members are saying, we're not going to pay these increases as we used to. And if you cannot demonstrate to us that this programming is compelling, our customers want it at a reasonable price, we're going to let it go. And frankly, when our members have been forthright with their customers to talk about what we're facing in that marketplace to negotiate these rates, our customers have been very, very supportive to say, listen, let it go. We don't need it. We really don't need it, and we weren't watching it anyway. So I think more as time goes on, we will see more of this disintegration of the sports programming bundle, the cable programming bundle, and even retransmission consent as broadcasters lose their leverage.
We're not there yet, but clearly it's trending that way.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a good time to change gears for a minute. And you mentioned this a couple minutes ago in your comments, that clearly, and I can speak for Shrewsbury, the industry or the conventional video cable operator of the 1980s and 1990s has dramatically changed.
Absolutely.
And in the year 2013, we crossed over to a provider that had more broadband or internet customers than video customers. And video customers continue to decrease largely on cost and demographic interest. Younger generations aren't necessarily as interested in watching television as my generation that I grew up with. But our broadband has gone in the other direction. People continue to add broadband. So if you just want to comment on that industry trend and what it means for your members in the future, they're really becoming broadband providers with a secondary product of providing video and phone, whereas prior to that, they were video providers who in the 90s added internet to their portfolio of services for their customers. So it's really a big change.
Absolutely right. And I appreciate, by the way, the fact that you have one of our websites here, keeptheconnections.com, which is focused on giving consumers more information about why video prices have increased, particularly from a retransmission consent perspective. And it's something that your customers can go to and see at keeptheconnections.com. And anybody can see that. So it's very, very helpful to provide that information. But it is true. I've been in this industry for 30 years. When I started as a young lawyer in 1986, cable was it. Cable was king. Content was king. That was what we were. We're cable operators. We're cable guys. That's what we thought of ourselves for many, many years. Even when broadband first started to become available in the 90s, and we started to provide broadband internet service, we still thought of ourselves as cable guys first. In other words, people may have a broadband connection, but we want them to be cable subscribers before they become anything else. That has significantly changed because consumers primarily have told us time and time again, we want choice. We want control. We cannot get that from video because, as I said before, it is not any of our members' fault that we have to deal with this cable bundle. Rather, we have to provide it. So what we now are realizing is our consumers and the trend for their interests and our long-term future is based on providing a broadband experience that is second to none, where we can give consumers the ability to go anywhere they want on the internet, to consume video, to gather information, to create, but they have to have that broadband plant first. So our members are looking at how can we deliver more, broader, faster broadband service to our customers to give them anything they want, to allow them to go anywhere they want, while at the same time they're looking at minimizing their video service over time.
And that looks like the future, Matt, because I know for at least here, us in Shrewsbury, we're going to put our capital dollars that we have, the limited capital dollars we have, in the broadband pipe and expanding the broadband pipe and creating faster speeds and providing a better broadband service for our customers because that broadband pipe does give them the choice that you speak about.
Absolutely.
So
it's essential.
I guess we have a few more minutes. There's a couple things I'd like to talk about.
Sure.
One is net neutrality. The other, I'll ask you first. We talked about historically cable and broadband. And so much rapid change in the last even 3 or 4 years. If we were sitting here to get together in 5 years, you come back to town, what do you see the industry looking like? Do you see cable boxes still in homes? Is there a vision of no cable box and everything streamed? Is that what your members are visioning, or what's your take? Or
well, first, I'd love to come back to town.
Okay.
Not in 5 years, but even next year. So okay. I love coming to visit, so thank you again. But I do think you're right. I mean, we are looking at fundamental technological change that is being delivered via broadband. And let's not forget, let's back up. I mean, when we talk about what the cable industry has done, it was pioneers who one day, years ago, said, I can put an antenna on a hill and carry that signal, that over-the-air signal, down into a valley. Okay, that is the essence of the broadband experience we have today that we created, that we are giving our customers to access the internet and information and video everywhere. So I truly do think that 5 years from now, so much more of the programming that we're fighting over on a video perspective will be streamed, will be available over the top on any number of devices. It might be a device from our members. It might be some other device. It might be an Apple TV, or it might be a Roku box or a TiVo box, or something that gives consumers the ability to navigate wherever they want to go. And I see that happening more and more. But it's all going to be based on broadband. And our members have to embrace the fact that they are broadband providers, not cable providers, and they have to think about servicing their customers from a broadband perspective and giving that customer everything that they want from a standpoint of the choice as well as navigation using that broadband pipe. So it's a fascinating time. I have seen enormous change over 30 years. The last 3 years have been remarkable, let alone the last 30, but we're going to see even faster change going forward.
Let's talk a little bit, Matt, about another big legislative issue before the FCC, something you're very involved with, and that is the concept of net neutrality. And what is net neutrality, and what does it mean for your members and their consumers?
Yes. It's one of those terms in Washington that, depending on your point of view, probably nobody can agree what net neutrality means. I can tell you what it means from our perspective. It's something that our members do every day, and that is they allow their customers, their internet service customers, to basically go anywhere they lawfully want on the internet. Lawfully want. And that means our members, as internet service providers, they don't block the ability of a consumer to navigate the internet. They don't discriminate, allowing some to navigate at faster speeds versus others. They don't engage in any sort of what's called paid prioritization, where they go out to other people that provide content to say, I'll give you a faster speed if you pay me. We don't do any of that. We provide the ability for our customers to go anywhere. There is the perception by those who want to regulate the internet, and trust me, net neutrality from the people who want to regulate the internet is not neutral. They want a regulated environment that regulates internet service providers like Shrewsbury, like all of our members, but not Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, none of these so-called big edge providers who frankly have such control in the home where they take advantage of the information that our members provide to them when they just surf the internet and to use it for advertising, pop-up ads, etc. The people that are for net neutrality regulation want to regulate our members so that they are assured we don't block, we don't discriminate, we don't engage in any paid prioritization. Our view is we've never done that to begin with.
We don't do that.
So why regulate us and not the people that actually are controlling your customers' privacy and their information? Fortunately, we have a chairman at the FCC, Ajit Pai, who served on the commission for 5 years before he became chairman, where he fought against any regulation of the internet, specifically of internet service providers. Now he's the chairman, and he has the ability to roll back regulations that were passed a couple of years ago under the former chairman, Tom Wheeler, that imposed 1934 era Title II common carrier regulations, which basically means rate regulation and other things, on our members. What happened when those regulations were imposed is it created a chilling effect on further investment and deployment within our members' sector, because how can you make a financial decision to spend capital expenditure dollars to expand your networks if you might be rate regulated, and you might never recover your costs? So there has been a chilling effect on investment. What Chairman Pai will do actually in December of 2017 is he will roll back these regulations to allow the FCC to basically regulate the internet as what's called an information service, which is a much lighter touch of regulation that will still prevent the same kinds of things ultimately, no blocking, no discrimination, no paid prioritization, but it will encourage more investment and deployment, which is exactly what Washington wants us to do. They want us to deploy more, not less. So this will be a big help to our members.
So you would advocate for that change?
Absolutely. This change will be extremely important. All of the things we talked about in terms of giving consumers more choice via our broadband plan would not happen if we cannot get these onerous Title II regulations repealed. So we are in support of the repeal of Title II, and we know that our members will continue to provide internet service freely to their customers without blocking, discrimination, or any restriction whatsoever.
Well, I know that I could talk to you all day about these topics, and there's many more that I had on my list to discuss with you, but we're out of time, and you have to catch a plane to get home to your family for Thanksgiving. So I can't thank you enough for flying up here today and meeting with us and educating our customers on what's going on in Washington.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very
It's been a
much.
privilege. Thanks very much. Appreciate it, Mike. Thanks.
Wow, that was quite the discussion. There's a lot going on. Again, the cable industry has changed a lot over the past 25 years, and the direction that it's going in now is obviously more towards broadband and less towards video. However, we're still left with the challenges of, we still have this cable video product, and how do we manage the costs? Bob, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's cable is really a legacy portion of the SELCO operation. We got the broadband with internet, and we've got telephone and also cable. But we're finding with these increased costs, most specifically as addressed in the previous interview that we saw, the retransmission consent accords that are really driving the force, is that it's driving us here in the town to seriously look at how much do we really want to focus on cable any longer. Whereas maybe our larger focus and more efforts and better resources can be focused on improving broadband, whether that's putting in fiber to new units being built across the town so we get fiber closer to the homes, or using other alternate means to increase the broadband throughput. Because as they presented during this last conversation, rates are just gone crazy.
Well, it's really a shame what the conglomerates are doing. They're really holding us hostage, the consumer hostage. And again, if you look at the industry overall and how much it's changing, that over-the-top service is really what's the next wave of watching programming on TV. Or laptop, or however you're watching your programs now. So again, it's the conglomerates that are trying to get a lot of money in a short period of time, knowing that we're dealing with a dying industry. And we as commissioners, we try to balance and try to figure out, advise Mike, on how, what's the best way to deal with that.
Well, in the electric side on SELCO, we've always driven that we want to provide the best product for the least amount of money, and we've done, I think, exceptionally well on that, keeping the rates down and whatnot. We have, based on this last interview, we have almost no control of what's going on in the cable side of the house. And as a result, a lot of the folks are abandoning cable and going over the top into using our broadband services, and I think that's the wave of the future. The problem is we've got a couple of things going on. First off, we have a lot of folks that aren't getting any younger, who are like me, probably an analog person in the digital world, who are not necessarily technically capable of reaching, of using the technologies that exist on broadband to circumvent these sorts of things. And we see that on the board, that we have to reflect back that a lot of our customers we're locked in to have to provide cable. And so what do we do, to try to keep those rates down as low as we can? Some of those things we're going to have to be considering and make some tough choices, is what potential channels or blocks of channels are we going to have to drop in order to keep the rates an acceptable rate for, most specifically, our elderly folks, but basically anybody that wants to have just straight cable.
Well, obviously the costs are escalating at ridiculous amounts. There's no way,
They were just talking about, I came on the board in 2011, and I think the numbers they used were somewhere between $1 and $2 for the big four channels that they were talking about. And that coming up in 2018, I mean, we're talking $10, $11. That's just to retransmit channels that if we just stuck our rabbit ears antenna up, we'd be able to get for free, or any of our other folks could. And we can't just do away with those channels, as far as cable goes. So we got to take a look at that. We're being held hostage to those rates.
Yeah, and actually the numbers are this. In 2011, we had 11,700 subscribers. SELCO did for cable, paying $1.91 per month for the big four channels. That was totaling about $270,000 in annual payments made by SELCO subscribers for free programming. Now, we're in 2017, obviously we have a declining cable base of subscribers. So we have now we have 9,300 subscribers, and they're paying almost $7 per month for the big four, which is costing them about $730,000 per year. And those costs will be going up to $1.3 million in 2018.
Yeah.
How do we like go to our consumer and say, okay, we're raising your rates these astronomical amounts so you can watch TV and so you can watch, basically just be able to flip around programs that you might not even be watching.
And what further exacerbates it is that for a number of those years that we're talking about, we, SELCO, used margin that we already had or profits that we already had to pay down some of those retransmission costs. So we didn't pass those on to the consumer. But unfortunately, over the last few years, we've had to directly turn around, and as it gets escalated, we're directly passing those fees on to the customer, and they can see what's going on. I mean, one of the things I think that was discussed was the fact that the big four aren't showing any mercy, because they've found their ratings are down.
Yep.
You know, and as such, they've got these huge contracts where they've got, and because their ratings are down, their advertising monies are so low that they can't pay for those huge contracts that they committed themselves for the out years. And so they're just going to jam it to us on these retransmission consent costs. So I see nothing in the future that's going to show any power turning on cable costs.
Not short term. You know, long term. I think long term the trend is, it's going to be what it is. Yeah. And for right now, they're just trying to rake in the money within this short period of time, because they know that this kind of gravy train is ending soon.
Yeah. Well, I think what goes on is that, and we can see this with some of the new construction going on in town, where we've been focused is really getting into more on the broadband side, i.e. internet, because we really see that as the wave of the future. And as a result, there's more bang for the buck on that. The consumer will be more interested in having the broadband capability, because they themselves, using whether it's their Roku or anything else, they can actually get their own programming over the top and not have to pay for a cable bill. And I think really realistically, the board's taking a look at how do we minimize the amount of funds that we use on the cable side of the house to make major improvements there, whereas the big bang for the buck is going to be for the consumer. Most people in town is going to be for broadband. Oh,
absolutely. I think it's also important to note that we are looking at significant enhancements to those to the broadband product, but also like the cable product, as far as how we're watching it, the TiVo and the Wi-Fi and again, but that's again a changing environment, and we need to change with the times. And that also goes back to the rules and regulations were written 25 years ago, and there hasn't been a rewrite. And that's definitely something that needs to take place. And I just found out today also that our Senator Markey was involved with writing those regulations 25 years ago. So maybe as we look at our population as consumers, what can we do? And obviously we need to go to the powers that be and say, okay, there needs to be a rewrite of these regulations at Congress. The Washington really needs to take a look at, get involved, because they got involved 25 years ago. I think they should be able to get involved right now.
I think I can't blame the common consumer in town for feeling that they've been, it's hostage taking.
Oh yeah,
That's what's going on with these rates.
Yeah,
and each and every one of us, not just as the board, because a letter from a board to Congress just seems, well, that's just a business related issue, but each of our own, customers themselves can vocalize with their own folks as far as in the political side of the issue, that these rates, this retransmission consent, ransom. It's going on. It has to stop.
It's out of control. It's out of control.
Especially for something that's free.
I know. Well, that's the kick in the teeth, isn't it? You could get this for free, and and this is another thing that our consumer can do. There's nothing stopping them from going out and putting that antenna and getting those channels for free, and then keeping their internet and getting over the top. Of viewing.
Well, and that's what happens is as more and more people go and do that, there's the fewer and fewer funds that come in to the actual cable side of the house for us, and those people that really need the cable, which mostly are more senior citizens like myself nowadays, it's going to be more costly for us on a per capita basis to be able to maintain the system to be able to do that. And I think there's going to come a time sooner rather than later that we're going to come out of the cable business and mostly be more almost directly focused on broadband. That may just take a lot of education for our older folks to make sure that we can get in there and provide the services to them so they can learn how to use it, because I just don't see us, 10 years down the road being in the cable
And I don't
industry.
think we're alone in that situation either. Like, obviously, it's where the business is going.
Yeah.
And we can't, we can't hold on to a dying business like that,
No.
and not be able to provide. Again, we also have our. We have our goals too, and our mission statement. And our mission statement is to provide a quality product at affordable prices. And when the outside powers that be don't allow us to do that, well, then obviously, then we need to revisit how we're doing business.
Oh yeah, it's a real challenge for us coming up. But fortunately, we got a pretty good team on the commission, and
yeah,
we got Michael Hale. And I'll be honest with you, I can't say enough to the folks that actually work for us, both on the cable and electric side. I think that most of the time, whether it's on the storms or whatever, the team that we have that's that here in town, our entire SELCO, it's 24/7 operation, and I can't say enough positive about what they do.
I don't think there's anybody that's going to say something negative about the customer service that we're able to provide our customers, which is it's great. I mean, you're not gonna get that anywhere else. And I think again, talking about Mike and his team, they should be very proud of the work that they do as far as everything that they do. Number one, but also their customer service is unbeatable.
Yeah. Good. Well, I thought it was impressive that that Mr. Matt Polka came here. He's the president of the American Cable Association. The number of members that he has nationwide, and he came actually here to Shrewsbury to use our facilities and to tape that that interview, and that'll be playing across the country as far as informing people of what's going on, because I don't think we can't advertise enough on this thing on the retransmission consent issues. We've got to make that stop.
Yeah, and we want you all to know it's not us, it's them. So we're just about out of time, Bob. So I want to say thank you very much for co-hosting with me. I'm sure Mike appreciates it as well. And I just hope you guys will join us next time when we start talking about what some of these enhancements are going to be. Number one, TiVo, and unfortunately, we do have bad news too, and that's the rate increases. So look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Maria.